Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of A Shameless Period. I'm really excited, also a bit nervous, but on the whole, just feeling really positive about today's session. So, just a few things that I'm going to be covering is so today we're starting on a blank canvas. And today, so what do I mean by a blank canvas? So, what I mean is that whoever is watching this video does not need to have any prior information uh, of what periods are, about menstruation, menstrual health, right? And people who are watching it, um, it's going to be a fresh start, right? It's going to be a fresh start at looking at menstruation, looking at women's health, and looking at yourselves and your relationship to this really significant process that happens to half the population. Yeah. And somehow, whether we uh, are aware of it or not, we are influenced by it. So yeah, so that is what I'm here to say, is that that today is a fresh start, and which is why there's something I want to request, is that even if you know something about menstruation, uh, and you have feelings and you have thoughts and emotions about it, I just want to request you to see if you can maybe step into the space, as a fresh start. And I really want to try and change our perspective of menstruation, menstrual health, the female reproductive system, and how it impacts the people around us, how it impacts the people we love, how it impacts us. Yeah. And yeah, so that brings me to my next point. My next point being that we're going to be handling shame in the room, right? And I don't want you to shun the shame. If you notice any kind of feelings of this shame, and certain kinds of feelings that I can probably describe to you would be a tingly sensation, a sense of overwhelm, and a sense of a sense of just having your beliefs may be challenged, and having a certain kind of resistance to the information I may be offering in this session and for the sessions to come. So, looking at shame, I'm going to actually ask you if you can just notice it, okay, and not be angry at yourselves for being ashamed if that feeling comes up, and actually just begin to become really familiar with what is this feeling of shame. And sometimes what can happen when you're ashamed of something is you have this impulse to look away, or the kind of material that may be shared may be really overwhelming, and you may want to shut down, you may want to get distracted. And there's space for all of that here, which is why there are this session is going to be available as a recorded version as well, because the information that may be coming up may be going against a lot of uh, a lot of things you've grown up with, a lot of things we've all grown up with, and beliefs that we've grown up with, mindsets we've grown up with. So that is not going to change overnight if it needs to. And, it's going to take time, especially if there's something really deeply inset uh, in the way we see this. And to people who don't know how to react to it, it's okay. Um, if you want to leave the talk, please go ahead. um, and if it's too overwhelming, do what you need to do. But at the same time, know that the video is always going to be available for you to come back to it. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. Another thing I want to say is allow the material to do its work. Um, if you don't like what's being said, all I'm saying is just consider it. Um, and just maybe mull over it and maybe see what are the different changes, how are you being challenged, what is the kind of resistance you're showing. It might be this thing of, oh, I'm really offended and my beliefs, and this is not true, and this is what I've grown up with. And so a lot of this may actually enter the space, and there may be a lot of fear in the room as well. And that is there for a reason. We all have different reasons for having the information we have, and I don't want to shame anybody for that, okay? Because it's just the way it is. So if you are coming here, then this is an opportunity for a fresh start. And that's what I want to offer. And all the information I offer is, it's just there. I'm just showing it to you. And it's up to you whether you want to take it, and whether you want to use it, and whether you want to integrate it into your life. So that choice and that power is completely yours. Okay. So yeah, so in from the time that I started this initiative, um, things have kind of, started rolling really beautifully, and people have been sharing their experiences with me. And you know what? I can't tell you how happy it makes me that there are my guy friends who have been asking me questions. I started talking about this to my family, and it was really heartening to see how people were feeling this. And of course, the women were definitely there in spirit. And that's so great. So thank you so much for just your support. Um, so, what I'd like to begin with in this talk is how I was introduced to the concept of menstruation. Um, so, this I actually wasn't aware of menstruation for a really long time, because my mom and dad, well, they just thought when the time comes, that'll be the time to tell her. But I did get a vague idea of what menstruation was when we had somebody talk to us in school, when I think we were about in the fifth or the sixth grade. And by then I think a couple of girls in my class already got their period by then. And I really feel for them today, and because there was just this hush hush whisper that went around in the class, like, she got it, oh, she got it. And and when that came to me, and I was like, oh, she got it, oh, I didn't know what she got. So I was like, that's great, why were you whispering about it, and what did she get? And so even at the age of 8 and 9, I had no idea about this. It was a completely different world. And finally, when we had this talk, that was when I was first introduced to it, and I was like, whoa, wait up, what is going on? And yeah, and even this lady, she tried to put it across as a story, but at the same time, there were these slides, and she was trying to describe the phenomenon of getting your first period. And that was actually quite an admirable effort, because we were asking, how would we know if we got it? When would we know? And uh, is it suddenly that it comes out? Because the one thing they said is, you don't have control over your flow, and it is the flow will have blood in it. And now, just put yourselves in the place of in the place of girls' shoes, listening to this at the age of, let's say, 10 and 11, that you're not going to have control of it, and it'll just flow out, and there's going to be blood, and it won't hurt, but sometimes you may get a tummy ache. And so you're having this information, and you're kind of trying to mull over it and understand this concept that you just don't know. You just um I was quite clueless, and that cluelessness actually gave me a I didn't know what I was looking out for, and that was quite scary for me. And then there was a time, and some of uh, the people who have shared their experience, and uh, people who are some guys who have shared their experience with me right now, ever since I started this page and I started the dialogue, is that they first encountered menstruation uh, actually when they saw their mums. And in the Indian context, it is that uh, some families, they have that, like, women don't touch anything. Women just don't enter the kitchen. They don't enter places of worship. So all of these, and there are certain, there not certain, there are quite a lot of restrictions, and they place around it, and it's quite ritualized, as one of them shared, and it and there was so much of shame involved. And the only even when they asked, the only thing that was told to them was, you'll know when it is the time. And I think that's really common for a lot of us, is that there's this assumption that when it is time, you know all will be okay and explained. And I that's not always the case. There's not everybody have the opportunity to learn about it. So what happens is, you're filling in the gaps. You're hearing about it, and when you're teenagers, it's like there's this real curiosity, and you find the guys kind of clump up together and the girls clump up together, and there's hushes and whispers, but the anecdotal information that they get, somebody from sisters, somebody from friends, and there's that real thirst for knowledge. Of course, it's quite scandalous initially, because anything new like this, and quite dramatic in its nature, is going to be scandalous when you first hear it. Like, what? This happens? No. And you see that kind of enthusiasm, and I think that's great enthusiasm, and it can definitely be harnessed um, in a very positive way. So to get the guys into the conversation, and often what happens when you're getting the talk is the guys are sent out of the room, and they said, this is the talk only for girls. So there's already a barrier being created. Girls think that, are made to think that, I can't share this with them. Like, it, it's going to be so awkward, it's going to be shameful, and it's going to do something to me. What it is going to do to me, nobody knows. But that sense of fear, and that sense of shame, and that embarrassment, and that thing of keeping it closeted, keeping it within you, is so high at that age. And yeah, and it's really quite a terrifying experience. And actually, to tell you the truth, it's actually some boys in my life, some guys, when as I was growing up, they were the ones who made it easier for me to talk about this to them. And they were the ones that said, I thought periods were a complete secret from guys, and they were telling me, oh yeah, like, what is it, your time of the month? And I would be like, oh, how did they know? And do boys know about this, and things like that. And they were the ones like, of course we know about it. And some of them, as I grew older, some of them, when I went to their house, like, yeah, we've got pads in our house. And these were boys who were brothers, and they didn't have sisters. And they said, yeah, we've got pads in our house, in case, like, our friends who are girls, they need it. And, you know, and it just opened my eyes to this whole new world. Like, damn, you guys made it easier for me to be okay and, like, breathe a sigh of relief that in case anything happens, I can ask you for a pad and you'd be able to give it to me. So it's really, so yeah, guys have contributed to that conversation. Anyway, so now moving into the kind of approach I'm going to take about menstruation is something we're going to look at menstruation, menstrual health from a biological perspective, yes, most definitely, but also as a social event and a social phenomenon, as well as how it psychologically impacts us. And so I feel like this contributes to a really holistic view, because um what happens is that we're taught about this as a purely biological phenomena, that menstruation will happen because um because a woman is coming of age, a child is coming of age and entering womanhood, and it is meant only for reproductive purposes. It is speaking purely about how that there is a reproductive purpose, and that is what is being activated in the body. And I think menstruation is so much bigger than that, massive. So we're going to definitely talk about that. So now, with menstruation is something that happens at the start of puberty. um yeah, it starts at puberty and it goes all the way up till menopause. So women, girls experience it as experience their first period at the time of puberty, and that's when you've entered puberty. And then as the years go by, towards probably the late 40s, early 50s, women start exiting the phase exiting the phase of menstruation, and that is called menopause, right? And so, yeah, that is just basically what menstruation is. And that's how, yeah, so now what is puberty? Puberty is something that we both, or everybody on the planet, experience, right? Puberty is when the reproductive system, you're exiting the stage of latency and you're going into the phase, you're entering this phase of the body getting sexually activated. There are sexual hormones that begin to be released. There's reproductive hormones that begin to be released, and your entire body starts going through a whole lot of changes. So I'm not going to dive into puberty right now. Puberty will be a separate episode, but that's basically what puberty is. Puberty is an introduction, initiation, and regulation phase, um, from the period of childhood in preparation for adulthood. So that is what puberty is. And that's what happens with our first menstruation. Uh, in our first menstrual cycle, you find that it is when the ovaries start getting activated, and then they release the eggs. They begin to release eggs. Excuse me. Yeah, they begin to release eggs, and which begins this whole cycle of changes that take place in the body. And then from then on, from the first period, it starts taking place every month. So now that I've kind of given you broad, um, a broad overview of what things are, we're going to start diving in to something that's more in detail and more in, do transsexuals, okay, so I've got a question here, and it's a fabulous question. Do transsexuals experience menstruation? So yes, so if you are a trans male, then you are going to experience menstruation. Uh, Even with the testosterone hormones, you're definitely going to still experience menstruation, because structurally, until those structures are taken out, until you go through all those structural changes in your operations, um, in the process of turning from a woman to a cis woman to a trans male, you will still continue having your periods. So which is why it's kind of transcended the boundary of gender. Yeah. And but do trans women will not experience the monthly cycle. So if you're transitioning from a cis man into a trans woman, then you're not going to experience the cycle even when you have the structural changes made to your body. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. And yes, so we're going to dive into something of a structural nature. And what we're going to do right now is I'm going to bring in the structure of the female genitalia. Yeah. So this is what female genitalia is, right? It is the external. So what is the genital area? The genitals is what it is that it is the external structures that's in place of our reproductive area, that entire external region. So I'm just going to break that down for you. So oh, not even, yeah, so now where you can see the mons pubis, yeah, that is the triangular area that is right below the abdomen. Okay, so that is it is a bone structure that in front of it has quite a cushiony tissue to provide comfort during sexual intercourse. Okay, and it is also where the maximum pubic hair grows for women. So you have that in that triangular region. Okay, then from there, from the mons pubis, you move to this entire region. So this entire region, which looks like uh, a bud. Okay, it's like a beautiful tulip bud. Okay, so that region is what you call the vulva, right? So the vulva consists of, as you can see, the labia majora, which is what you call like the major lips, and they are the outer lips, and it's quite spongy and cushiony to touch, but at the same time it has this kind of skin on it. Okay, like softer skin, but it is that kind of skin. Then you move to the labia minora. Okay, and that is the inner folds of which is encased within the labia majora, right? And this area you'll find is actually quite moist, and the skin is actually quite tender. It's quite tender and it's very sensitive. And as you can see, the labia majora and the labia minora, they're like the hoods. Okay, so the labia majora and the labia minora form the hood for the clitoris. So what is the clitoris? So the clitoris is actually it has a lot of blood vessels, and it also has plenty of nerve endings and soft tissue, right? So the clitoris is really important for this entire structure, this entire system. Now, the thing is, in a clitoris, the clitoris to look at is actually really small. But what is lesser known about the clitoris is it is almost very, very similar to the penis. It is made of erectile tissue, and there are loads of blood vessels. So during sexual intercourse or any kind of sexual arousal, like this area, the hood, the clitoral hood, and the clitoris, they get engorged because there's so many blood vessels in this area, and they're quite stimulated during arousal. So And there are a bunch of nerve endings. There is like a bunch of nerve endings during the clitoris that carry on way inside the female reproductive system. So it's like it's a muscular structure similar to the penis. And it is really sensitive. It is in charge of pleasure, sensitivity, arousal. It is very sensitive to these responses. Yeah. And I think that that is really important, and I'll let you know why shortly. Okay, and then you have the urethral opening. Okay, so that shows, and then you have the vaginal opening. So this goes to show that actually this they are separate structures. So you have the urinary system. Um, you have the urinary system, which is different in women, and the reproductive system. So they're not linked. As opposed to in men, it's the same passageway that is used for both, ejaculation as well as letting out urine. So yeah, so these are some of the structures that we're going to be looking at, and of course, then you have the anus, which is basically your butthole. Okay, and that there's a hard bone-like structure from this area, from the area of the posterior end of the clitoral hood to the anus, and that is quite a thick, like it's quite a bony region, and that's what we call the perineum. Yeah, it's not written here, but yeah, this line. So, and this is what you call an inferior view of the vagina. So basically, how you would get this is most ideally if if you like spread your legs like that and click a selfie from here, then you're going to probably see something structurally similar to this. Yeah. And wait, yes. So structurally similar to this. But now, because we are all about shameless, this is a very diagrammatic representation. It's a really diagrammatic representation. It's what you would find in the textbooks. Yeah. And yeah, so I feel that this is not exactly how it is. It's it's a good thing for clarity, but I'm going to show you what a real vagina looks like, the genitals, right? So this is your anterior view of the genitals, and this is how. So this area you see here is the mons pubis that we were talking about, and then you see the division of the clitoral hood, and then you see the clitoris here. So all these regions kind of become really activated and like swollen during sexual intercourse, and because of the blood that rushes here, very similar to the penis. And then you have here the anterior view of the vagina, and as you can see, there's the entrance to the vagina, and then you have the urethral opening here. Yeah. So just take a good look. Okay. Oh, yeah. Just take a good look. And I know that this can be really challenging to watch for some of us. Some of us are jumping inside, but it's really just structures. It's a physical structure. And I'd really love you all to just take some time to view it and to just see what it's like, maybe relate it. Maybe some of y'all have experiences. People who've had sexual experiences obviously are going to be familiar with this. And if you feel that you've not felt yourself down there, I'd really urge you all to explore a bit and get to know the structures. And yeah, and also one thing, even in this picture, you can see that this is still pretty much a shaved genital area. And but it's a shaved genital area. It's very maintained, it's very groomed, and that's actually not how it always is. And I'm not sure if people are aware of what it actually looks like, or maybe you are, but even then, I'm just going to. So, what it actually probably resembles more is this. Okay, so if you're not grooming it, and if you're just going to allow it to grow, then this is the mons pubis area that you see here. And so it's pretty opaque. And you find that the pubic hair that you get here is really thick. And what and the thing is, you're probably going to think that, oh my gosh, that looks repulsive, because we've been told that it looks repulsive. But actually, the hair over there grows because of protective purposes. It provides cushioning, and it also, so evolutionarily, because we did not have the whole clothing thing going on back in the cave times and stuff like that, it's to prevent any kind of infection, like any kind of foreign particles from getting in. And so it's very protective in its purpose. And yeah, it's your very own fur coat. So yeah, so that is that. Then we just dealt with the external um, the external genitalia, the external region of this. And then now I'm going to start moving into the internal area. But before that, I also want to just mention that the reason I showed you the genital area, I spoke so much about the structure of the clitoris, the clitoral hood, and how it influences our sexual experiences, is because your menstrual identity and how you identify with menstruation is linked to your sexual identity, your sexual experiences, your attitude towards yourself in this area of sexuality, right? And I'm not speaking specifically in terms of the act of sex, but I'm talking about everything else that happens very naturally for us, whether it is feelings of arousal and uh, having having fantasies and having wet dreams. And just so you know, women have wet dreams too. So I just and the this is really important because um, when girls are taught about menstruation, they are not taught about it as an entire holistic set of changes that's going to occur to them. Changes that is going to result in a change of perspective, is going to result in physical changes and like internal biological changes. What they're told what they're told about menstruation quite often is that this is the system that's going to lead you to having babies. It doesn't address the the kind of feelings that you're going to go through, and it's quite a stormy time, and you're going to go through very sexual feelings suddenly coming up, very erratic. But on the other hand, when people educate men at the time of puberty, when you're educating boys about their physical changes and the hormonal changes, the way it is put across to them is that you're going to have these feelings, you're going to have erections, you're going to have ejaculation, and you're going to have wet dreams, you're going to have fantasies, you're going to want to have sex. Now, you're already instilling in them a sexual identity as part of the reproductive process, right? You're looking at it, and it's not bad. It is great, because what you're preparing boys for is that you're going to want to do this, you're going to want to explore, you're going to go through these changes in your body. But on the other hand, I have to also acknowledge that people are really iffy to talk about men's reproductive health. So in the coming sessions, I am going to touch upon it once we get through this entire series. Okay. So they although they do experience a lot of discomfort um, in terms of erections that they have no control over and things like that, they are spoken, the messages around them are given to them as if that men are sexual beings, whereas for women, women are reproductive beings. So you see, there's a divorcing of the sexual identity from the menstrual identity, which and but at the same time, both these identities hold a lot of shame, because one of them holds desire, one of them holds fantasies and like wanting to have sex, and then the other end is discharge and blood and all these very physically dramatic things that are happening to you, and they both hold so much of shame. And but at the same time, they're both so interlinked because they're part of reproductive health, and they're really intertwined. So shame in one area means shame in the other area, and if you're gonna tackle one area, you're going to have to tackle the whole system, which is why I'm reiterating that your sexual identity, paying attention, bringing sexual identity into the room is equally important to your menstrual health. Yeah. And it's also for your psychological well being, because immediately something's not allowed. You're not allowed to think of desire, you're not allowed to think of wet dreams, fantasies. And these things really affect you, because I remember that, having feelings, having crushes on guys and just not knowing what to do about it. I would start, insulting them and being really mean to them, because I just didn't know how to handle these feelings. I didn't know how to, it was a very foreign feeling for me. And I was just like, what is this feeling that I have when I'm in front of this person? And so I used to be really mean to them. And the thing is, that's because I wasn't allowed to have a sexual identity. I wasn't allowed to want them. Okay, I was just like, no, you have to focus on your studies, and this is not the time for it. And it's not only me who gets this, and it's not. And the thing is, I don't blame the people who were telling me these messages, because they were told the same thing. And so I don't blame them. Okay. But it is something that has, which is why even our parents have, like, this is something that's an issue for them as well. And for our aunts and our grandparents and uncles and, the whole system, is that if you've been told something by them, it's because they were told that by somebody else, and they had grown up that way. So if you have gone through a hard time, it's also because they've gone through a hard time. So yeah, just putting that out there. So yes, now we're going to move into the internal system, the internal reproductive system. Yeah. Okay, let me just check if there are any questions. No. Okay. So we're going to move into the internal. So this is after you have the genital structure, you have the vagina. And this is from the vagina onwards. Okay, what happens inside. So this is a vertical cross section of the female reproductive system. I hope you can see this. This opposite camera is a bit confusing for me, so bear with me. Yeah, so now you have the vagina. Yeah, the vagina right here. So your vagina is basically a tunnel, and it is your entryway and exit way to this entire system. Okay, it is also the cup holder of ejaculation and semen, and so that is during sexual intercourse. Now, then you move up to this thinner tunnel called the cervix. Now, the cervix, what happens is during it has a lot. It's kind of a thickened mucus area. It has a quite a thick mucus plug, right? And it makes it pretty difficult for the sperm to enter through this. Okay, so that's basically how um, the the chosen ones get to the egg, right? So this area is the cervix, And then here we're moving into a more relevant area, quite a red zone for the menstrual area is your uterus. Okay, so you have your uterus here, and now my finger is tracing one of the fallopian tubes. So this is from the uterus, you have the fallopian tubes, and the fallopian tubes ending at the ovaries. Okay, so you have two sets of these. So now the thing is with women, as like girls as such, girl children and women are born with the eggs. Okay, whereas in guys, in men, there is constant sperm production. So you have the eggs already within these ovaries. Okay, so now this is what happens during puberty, and this is what your first menstrual experience is going to be. So now you see this endometrium. The endometrium is something. The endometrium. Oh gosh, where's this damn thing? Yeah, the endometrium is your uterine wall. Okay, now the uterine wall is the main lining that, so this is what gets shed every month, and that's the blood and the tissue that women experience as discharge, or girls and women experience as discharge. So this is quite an important, it is a point of focus for us. Okay, so now today we're going to be talking about ideally what happens in a period, ideally. All right, so now what happens is, okay, I look at the menstrual cycle as the end of something. Okay, so you have an egg that releases from the ovary. Now now when this egg is released from the ovary, okay, you have the egg goes into the fallopian tube through these really cool pom-pom like fingers called fimbrae. Okay, so they keep moving like this. Okay, and they're like your own little cheerleaders, and then they take the egg, right? And so you have this egg right here. I don't have it colored. So you have this egg right here. Okay, yeah, so you have the egg there. So now once the egg is inside the fallopian tube, they're going to be contraction, like in the sense these fimbrae are going to keep swaying and moving this egg through the fallopian tube as it makes its journey towards the uterus. Now simultaneously, what happens is as the egg is as the egg is moving here, the uterus is making preparations to receive an egg if there's a chance of fertilization. So that means if there's a chance of sex, and there's the sperm meets the egg and starts becoming a zygote, it gets implanted on the uterine wall. So what happens is the uterine wall starts becoming much thicker. Okay, so it starts becoming thicker because it's filled with nutrients. So it starts filling with nutrients, and it starts becoming thicker so that it can host the zygote, right? Now, so what happens in a menstrual cycle is once the egg reaches here, right, and finds that there's no sperm for it, the sperm hasn't found it, and all of that. So it makes its way, it says, okay, my life is done, and it makes its way outside, right? And because of that, now all the uterine lining that's happening here, the endometrium, that's been thickening over the month, what starts happening is it starts shedding once the egg has exited the system, which is when you start seeing that it starts getting mixed with blood and vaginal fluid and mucus. And that is the combination of the discharge that women experience during menstruation. So it is on the first day that's when the bleeding starts and to shed the layers. And that is a period. That is basically what your period is the shedding of the menstrual, the shedding of the uterine wall, the thickened uterine wall, and so that it can prepare for the next cycle, right? I hope It may be a fact that this divorcing of teas between boys and girls may be case in. Okay, I will come to that question. Yeah. Okay, so just getting back to this. Okay. So you have this going on. Okay, so all of this is taking place. Now, the process of shedding this and making sure all the layers get out. Okay, and it's like it's a blank canvas for this, for the reproductive system. Okay, when all this gets out, so that takes about 3 to 7 days. Okay, so that is the experience of periods for women, is ideally 3 to 7 days, after which it again starts, like, the ovary will again start to, like, activate and like release an egg and stuff, and all that takes, and that's a 28-day cycle. So this is an ideal situation, okay, because I'm just setting the foundation for the rest of the episodes. So yeah, so that is what this is. And so you have an ideal 28-day cycle. The menstrual, the experience of the menstrual period is ideally 3 to 7 days. And you're going to have a shedding of the uterine wall. And that's why, and this is mixed with blood, and it's mixed with blood and vaginal fluid and a bit of mucus and a lot of water. So it holds a lot of water in it. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I've realized that in itself can be a lot of information, and you may need to revisit this a couple of times just to um, just to kind of see the different elements of it, and feel free to do that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to move on to is, what are the symptoms that we experience during those 3 to 7 days? Um, Now, during the 3 to 7 days, you have the tender breasts, you have muscle aches, headaches, abdominal cramps, lower back pain, lower end, like a lot of fatigue, then there's bloating, fluid retention, there's joint pain, there's acne, there's diarrhea or constipation, both ends of the spectrum. And you may have trouble sleeping, having continuous periods of cycle, uh, having a continuous sleep cycle. Okay, but what hasn't been mentioned here, and in my experience, is there are fluctuations of sexual desire as well. And sometimes it's almost like, um, you know, I just want somebody to be there and I want to have physical contact. But at the same time, paradoxically, my body has felt like, you touch me and I will punch you. Okay. So it's really a very confusing time. And then when you're having a lot of these pains, right? A lot of the discomfort. So as you can see, muscle aches, headaches, abdominal cramps, lower back pain, low energy, bloating, fluid retention, joint pain, acne, diarrhea, constipation, tender breasts, body sensitivity, right? Like there's a general level of body sensitivity. And then when you're going to have that period of arousal, and it's not always there, but like once in a while it gets in the way, it's a very painful experience. And there's very little research done about this, in the sense of what is this experiential thing, because again, people do not want to talk about it, which brings me to the question that has been written here, that um, it may be a fact that this divorcing of identities between boys and girls may be the case in India, but is this how it is treated or approached all over the world, even in more open minded and progressive countries? Yes, it may be a little better in some places, and it may be really, really, really uh, quite regressive in some places. But on the whole, women's health is very, very like little, very little research has been done on women's health. Okay, and if you actually see that it was only about 30 years ago was there focus given to the structure of the clitoris as being a point of massive importance. Okay, and the thing is, when it comes to periods and things like that, there is very little research done. And that is also because one is nobody talks about it because there's so much of shame. Two is there's so much of stigma around it. And there's so many, what would you say? There's a lot of physical shaming that takes place. Um, Even when you don't have the ritualistic aspects as present in India, you have other kinds of shaming that take place in more progressive countries. Of course, they may be more open to explanations, but at the same time, there's a lot of misconception. And there's a fear to talk about it. And you talk about this with anyone, you will see that the majority of people are afraid to talk about it. It's like as if you're giving something very personal away. You're talking about the private region. And the more we're going to consider this the private region, then there are lesser possibilities of research. There's going to be lesser open mindedness to figuring out solutions, figuring out comfort for anybody, whether it is male reproductive health or female reproductive health. This thing of the private region makes it quite a hindrance towards finding a better way into a more comfortable kind of lifestyle, a healthier lifestyle, also a healthier relationship with your body, in for yourself. So yeah, and just gonna check if there's anything else that I have missed out. And so far, this is the first. This is the first one. I know it has been really theoretical, and there's a lot of information I've given here. But the thing is, if we're going to start on a blank canvas, this would be ideally, for me, in my view, a good way to start. So if you have any questions, if you feel like I've missed out something, if you feel like you want me to address anything else around this, please do message me on the page, or even if post. I'm not sure if you can post on my page, but if you can, please do that. And how this talk has impacted you. Yeah, so just give me a feedback. So I'm just going to summarize what all we've covered today, because we've covered a lot, right? So one was we spoke about the relevance and the importance of entering the space on a blank canvas. And, it's a fresh start for menstrual education. Then the other thing I talked about was shame. And if there's kind of, shame that's prickling at you and you're finding things really overwhelming, allow it to be there. And if you feel that it's too overwhelming, that you can't sit through the talk, that's perfectly fine. Come back to it when you feel you're ready to. If you want to, it's all yours. It's your choice. Then we also spoke about how, we're not really spoken to about this in a very clear manner. And that can lead to a lot of misinformation. It can lead to a lot of assumptions. It can lead to a lot of fear. And having shame in the room makes it really difficult to address the situation. And it's never really helped anyone. Yeah. Then we covered very briefly about puberty, and then looking at menstruation from a really holistic perspective, biological, psychological, social, and maybe even spiritual. And if I get the opportunity, I will bring that in and just offer it up to you. Then we moved into identity, and how menstrual identity and sexual identity is inherently intertwined with the rest of our identity, and it's core to us, and it is core to our psychological identity and how we view ourselves, and that impacts the way we live on a day-to-day basis. So super important. Then we visited the genital structure, and the female genital structure, what it appears to be on the outside, and we made our way to the internal reproductive structures. And then we moved into the symptoms given and what the impacts are based on the questions that were asked. So yeah, so please give me feedback about how you found this session. If I need to tone it down a bit, what could be more helpful to receive this information in a better way. And yeah, if I find a way to do that, I will. I will be putting up the links from where I've got all the information, including the structure of the clitoris, which is actually done by this beautiful artist researcher. Her name is Sophia Wallace, and she gives a beautiful TED talk about it. So I will put up all those links for your reference. And yes, and which brings me to the last point for today is for episode 2. Episode 2, what I have planned is to cover puberty and all the changes that take place during puberty for women in this segment. Maybe down the line, after I'm done with the menstrual segment, I can do one on the whole thing of men's reproductive health, and that's where I anyway plan to take this, because we need to know the other side as well. Yeah. And so the next session is next Saturday, which is the 29th of August. It is about puberty and all the changes that take place. It is going to be on at 3:30, which is British summertime, and which is 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And yeah, I hope to see you there. Please send me your experiences of puberty, questions around puberty, what all what all you came up with, what your impressions of puberty are, and let's just make this as you know as lively a session as possible and as engaging as possible. So thank you so much, and I will see you next Saturday. And I will put up the takeaways of today's session a little later. Yes. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.